All right, good morning, everyone. And welcome, fellow Missoulians, to the City Club's April Forum, State of the Community 2023, Navigating Change in a Strong Community. I'm Dave Peppinger, and I have the privilege of serving as a Vice Chair of the City Club Missoula's Board of Directors. Thank you all for being here today. We've got a big crowd, so a lot to get through. City Club's mission is to bring people together to inform and inspire them on issues vital to the community through public forums that encourage the discussion of new ideas and free exchange of thought. We have a deep commitment to civility and civil discourse, even when discussing challenging issues. There might be a couple today. Before introductions, some thank yous. Thanks to Missoula Community Access Television, which records our forums as part of their media assistance grants to nonprofit organizations. MCAT serves our community on cable channels 189 and 190. MCAT occasionally live streams our forums. Not sure if that's happening today, but occasionally they do that on its local live platform as well. You can also find videos of past City Club forums by clicking on video button on our website, cityclubmissoula.com. Thanks to our sponsors, those at the executive level, they are Blackfoot Communications and First Security Bank. Our executive level sponsors are key partners in helping to expand the audience access and conducting our forums, as well as many other sponsors we have. Thank you. We're grateful to all our sponsors, and we invite you to join, and of course, thanks to our board of directors and our administrator, which wouldn't happen without her, Danny Howlett. So before I get into it, the next person I'm going to introduce, she knows a lot about a lot of things. She's our moderator today, and that's Jill Valley. So Jill Valley has been an anchor reporter at KPAX for the past 30 years, which is really impressive because she looks 29. So she graduated from Washington State University and landed her first TV job in Alabama before heading to Missoula, where she worked at KCI for 2 years. Then she made the amazing long trek over to KPAX across town. She earned Emmy nominations for reporting and accolades from the Montana Broadcasters Association for her journalism work and enjoys exploring Missoula in her spare time. Jill will announce our panelists, and I will see you at 11:55 at the break, at which point we'll begin table talk, and then the open forum questions will begin. Over to you, Jill.
All right. Thank you. All right, this is the who's who of Missoula, I feel, right? It's funny, I was looking at my Facebook memories, and the thing that popped up was the very first photo I ever posted wearing a mask. So 3 years ago, we were in the middle of who knows what, scary times, but I think we've emerged now, 3 years into this. We've suffered loss in the community, we've suffered great gains in the community. It's exciting to take a look at the state of our community for this year because so many things are happening and so many things are changing. And, you know, this is a community that loses its mind over Chick-fil-A, but then still feels really sad about the businesses that we have lost. And I think now it's not a big deal to see Kevin Costner downtown Missoula, but we also worry about what kind of impression we're giving on the world that everybody wants to live here. You know, there's so many of us that are clinging to the Missoula of the old, quieter, smaller, slower, versus what we're facing. Have you seen our downtown lately? It's vibrant and fantastic, and so many things are happening, but it's always hard to find that balance between what was and what could be. But we live in a community where I can send a mean email to the mayor about a subdivision near my house, and he's going to answer me back, and we could have that great conversation, and I really appreciate that about our leaders. And we can do that with Seth Bodnar and with the county commissioners too. So people are listening, and I know you have your concerns, so it's going to be great to hear your questions for our panelists. I'll introduce them now. We're going to start with Seth Bodnar, and of course, every time I read his bio, I feel unworthy of standing on a stage with this guy, but here we go. Of course, you know Seth is the 19th president of the University of Montana, graduated first in his class from West Point, got the both Rhodes and Truman scholarships, earned 2 graduate degrees from the University of Oxford, served as an assistant professor in the Department of Social Sciences at West Point, where he taught economics. He has a distinguished military career serving in the 101st Airborne Division and the U.S. Army's 1st Special Forces Group. But don't we all, right? We all do that. Yeah, okay. Before coming to the University of Montana, Seth was a senior executive at General Electric, where he was responsible for long-term strategy and business transformations at GE Transportation. He is married to Missoula native Chelsea Elender, and together they have 3 children. So, welcome, Seth. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Jill, for the introduction, and thanks to Olive City Club for putting on this event. This is one of my favorite events of the year, and it's such a privilege to be here with you. You know, I get invited to this because I'm here in my capacity as the president of the university. But my far more important role, of course, is as a husband and as a father. As you just heard, my wife Chelsea grew up here, and we are so grateful to be raising our 3 kiddos in this community. And days like today are a great reminder why. The caliber of the leadership across this community and the engagement of members of this community is just tremendous. And I'm so grateful to City Club for bringing together so many who are so committed to devoting their time and their talents to make Missoula such a special place. So, I was pleased to learn of the theme for today's event, which includes the word change alongside the word strong. And because we know that there's plenty of change that's happening in our community right now, and change inevitably brings challenge. But I also know that working together, we are strong. And working together, I know that we have the opportunity to leverage our unique missions to shape an even stronger, more inclusive Missoula. Now, many of you know, and those of you who work at the university can't not know that if I'm going to give an update on the university, I'm of course going to talk about our mission and the importance of that mission, which essentially you can boil down to 2 words: inclusive prosperity. And that means that our job at the University of Montana is to make sure that every single member of our community is able to reach their unique full potential, regardless of where they came from, who their parents were, what they look like, how much money they have. And it's our job to foster both economic as well as civic and cultural growth in our community that is both sustainable and inclusive. So UM's a pretty special place. If you think about the campus across the river there, you look at our campus today, around 34% of our undergraduates are the first in their family to attend college. And about 1/3 of our undergraduates are also Pell eligible, meaning that they arrive here in Missoula from socioeconomic circumstances of exceptional financial need. And this, the composition of our student body just emphasizes how high the stakes are for our students. Our students are choosing UM because they're aiming to redirect the trajectory of their life and the trajectory of their kids' and grandkids' lives. And so for me, I am honored every day to get up and get to come to work on such an important mission. And I'm excited to report there's a lot of good stuff happening at UM right now. It's a great time to be a Grizz. On the enrollment front, that's always for people's first question. We've had 4 straight semesters now of enrollment growth. And last fall, we welcomed the largest freshman class to campus in 6 years. And the outlook for this coming fall is bright again. But even more importantly than bringing larger classes in is the fact that our students are succeeding at higher rates. Our first to second year retention rate has grown by about 7 full percentage points in the last 4 years, and that's tremendously important, especially when you take into account that there's been a pandemic in that time period as well, and a lot of challenges that have been layered onto our students' experience. But and I'm proud to tell you that growth is inclusive growth. Our Native American student enrollment, for example, is up 24% since 2018. And our retention rate among Native American students is up more than 13 percentage points. So that's inclusive prosperity. Research also continues to grow. I think I shared with this group last year that we achieved Research 1 status among the top 4% of universities in the country, and research expenditures are up double digits again this year. And that research is not only expanding the reaches of human knowledge and addressing some of the most pressing issues facing our society today, that research is also creating jobs and companies right here in our community. And of course, if you've been on campus lately, you'll see the cranes, you'll see a lot of equipment, you'll see a lot of work going on. We're in the midst of the largest infrastructure refresh in the history of our campus. So I do want to remind folks, temporary inconvenience for permanent improvement. So I do apologize for some of the inconvenience, but these refreshed, these renewed living and learning spaces will benefit not just students in the coming years, but students for generations to come. So I'm really excited about the progress we're making at UM. Now, we're of course not immune to the challenges that everybody else is facing. Inflation is making our job tougher every day. The housing crunch we're not immune to that. So we're working to address that. One of the reasons we've revamped, in the midst of revamping our on-campus housing, refurbishing new dorms. We're working to break ground on a new dorm. Refurbishing old dorms, and working to break ground on a new dorm next summer. So really growing our housing stock on campus. And we've been working to address employee pay, and we're grateful for the pay plan that passed through the legislature this session. So thanks to the legislators in the audience. I saw a few of you out there. One of I would argue perhaps the most worrisome challenge facing higher ed right now, though, and it's not unique to us, but that's the national decline in students who are attending college. In fact, the proportion of high school graduates who are enrolling in college directly out of high school has dropped 7 full percentage points since just 2016. Now, thankfully, we're bucking that trend at UM. Enrollment is growing at despite the national decline, so that's a good thing. But we all should be concerned when we talk about challenges. We should be concerned about the numerous polls that show us that public confidence in higher ed has been eroding for almost a decade, and we're seeing that flow through in enrollment right now. And so why am I so concerned about that? I actually cite this as the largest national security challenge that no one's really talking about. And the reason is, we've staked our claim as a country as an innovation-based economy. We're okay as we look at our phones and our computers when it says assembled in China, but designed and conceptualized in the U.S. We rely on innovation, and innovation requires education. And if you fast forward 30 years to the United States of America, where you have a significantly lower proportion of people who have received education beyond high school, and we claim to be an innovation-based economy, well, we're in trouble. We have to address that. And there's numerous reasons why perceptions of higher ed have changed, and why students maybe are opting out of education beyond high school. You could cite a strong job market, you could cite cost, you could cite politicization, and look, if we had more time, I don't want Brett to put his minute up there, so I've got to go quickly. He's waving it. He's threatening my time limit. So this is a long topic that we should delve into. But whether we agree with the reasons or what they are, we have to address this. We have to adapt, and at UM we are. We're expanding our offerings. In recent years, we've launched new programs like environmental science and sustainability, our public health programs, our interactive media and game design program. These programs are growing, they're relevant, they're impactful. This fall, we'll launch a 4-year degree in cybersecurity for the first time at the University of Montana, first one in the state. So programs matter. We're also working to address cost issues. We know that UM is a tremendous value compared to most universities. In fact, our resident tuition at the University of Montana is more than 25% lower than our peers in other Western states. So it's tremendous value. But for students at the lower end of the income scale, tuition's still a challenge. And that's why we launched this past year the Grizzly Promise program. The Grizzly Promise program guarantees to all Montanans who come from families making less than $50,000 that they can go to UM tuition free. It's why we're also focused on, but it's not just getting them to UM, we got to graduate them. and we got to make sure they're ready. That's why we launched our Elevate You program, which is a totally revamped approach to career readiness. And it starts, frankly, in orientation and make sure that every student gets an internship and gets significant career and work-based learning. And we're also expanding our educational aperture to consider people at all stages of their lives and career. And I'm so proud of the impact of our Accelerate Montana program, which is direct employer partnerships to provide high-demand, short-term training for people across sectors, like technology, boiler operations, welding, heavy equipment management, software modeling, dental assisting. We're doing this across the state, and we've put more than 1,200 people through Accelerate Montana programs in the last year. I'm getting my red card, and so I will close for there. But I would just underscore that the participants in Accelerate Montana, they're seeking a better life for themselves. They're making an impact on their communities. And when we talk about inclusive prosperity, this is exactly what we're talking about. And this is the type of innovation we're doing at the University of Montana. So I'm grateful for the time and look forward to questions and discussions. Thanks.
Well, enrollment will go up by at least one this fall because my daughter, who insisted she never wanted to go to the University of Montana, wrapping up her first year at Whitworth and said, "Mom, I'm applying to the University of Montana. I'm coming home." So, yay! So go Grizz. I guess that's ingrained in all the Missoula kids, so that worked. So I'm happy about that. All right, now I'm going to introduce Josh Slotnick, who is a Missoula County Commissioner. He was elected to the commission in 2018. He has farmed in Missoula with his wife on their family farm since 1992. It was in 1996 that he co-founded Garden City Harvest and the Peas program in the Environmental Studies program at the University of Montana. He originally moved to Missoula from Grand Forks, North Dakota to earn a philosophy degree from UN and then served in the Peace Corps in Thailand before getting a certificate in ecological horticulture from the University of California, Santa Cruz, and then a master's degree in ag extension from Cornell University. He joins us now to give us his thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks to City Club. Thanks for having me here, and it's an honor to share the stage with these folks. And as you saw, I ran in late. I wish I could say that City Club is just scorched into my brain at 11:30, but really I was just reeling from the plot twist on Succession last night. And just wrenched, really. So when thinking about navigating change, I want to start with something that needs to change, and that's property taxes. And before you get all yawny, give me a minute. Our tax system ought to match our economy. I can rest on that as kind of a founding principle for this argument I'm going to lay out to you. Our tax system ought to match our economy. Well, there was a time when it did. If you were to go back a handful of decades, when I was just beginning my teaching career at the U of M, Missoula County was a much different place than it is now economically. We had a small handful of large industrial employers that had big footprints, and those entities carried the burden of property taxes, nearly 60%, with 40% on the backs of residents. At that very same time, home values were pretty low. Not just pretty low compared to where they are now, but pretty low compared to home values nationally. And we had a thin tourist economy compared to how the tourist economy we have now. At that point, I'm talking about a few decades ago, we were a pass-through between Yellowstone and Glacier. And back then, our property taxes kind of worked. Flash forward to the present. Our economy has radically changed. Those big footprint employers, big footprint, literally big geographic footprint, they don't exist anymore. And it's sad to have gone through this transition, and right now we are economically stronger, more diverse, more resilient, and that property tax burden has shifted from industry onto the backs of residents. It was 60-40 one way, now it's 60-40 the other way. And those home values I mentioned, I don't even need to describe it. Everybody knows what we're in terms of home values. I did look this up about a month ago when I was beginning to prepare for this talk. At that point, median home price in Missoula was 144% of a median home price nationally. It's probably, could be even more now. The last piece of this in change that's so important to me is what's happened with our tourist economy. Last year, we had 3.5 million tourists visit Missoula County. We have 120,000 residents. That's from the Institute for Tourism and Recreation Research. 3.5 million tourists, 120,000 residents. And they stayed for nearly a week. And this is a great thing. They poured millions and millions into our local economy, tons of jobs. This is definitely part of who we are. And please don't mistake what I'm about to say is not anti-tourism, it's pro-tax reform. When those 3.5 million folks are here for nearly a week, they use our services.
And park in our parking.
And they park in our parking. Exactly. We pay for that. We pay for all those services. And it's no accident that they're here for nearly a week. It's not just that we're partway between Yellowstone and Glacier. It's because this place is really wonderful. For all the reasons everybody here could rattle off. And a bunch of those things happened not by accident, but because we paid for them. We created these things. We created these amenities in this amazing place where you can have an arts culture a stone's throw away from the wild, majestic beauty of the Swan Valley. There are just not very many places like that. So when thinking about property taxes and change, I thought, and folks I work with thought, how do we get our tourists to cover some of the costs and take some of that burden off the backs of residents? So I went on a bit of a tour. I went and spoke mostly with county commissioners, because those are the folks that I know through Montana Association of Counties, and mostly county commissioners from the majority party, because politics is the art of the possible, and they run the show. And I brought this question: how could you feel good about charging tourists for some of the services they use? What would that have to look like for you, Republican elected official, to feel good about this? And what I heard back was really interesting, and I want to rattle these off right now. First thing I heard, and this was like a pounded drumbeat: no new money for government. Sure, charging tourists for using services is a good idea, but you can't have new money for government. That was what it was. Second one: some counties in the state don't get the benefit or the burden of tourists, and if you all here in places like Missoula County are going to be charging tourists for services, you need to share the wealth. So we got to come up with a way, if we're going to charge tourists, to send some of that money to the state that they could redistribute out to counties that don't share our type of economy. Next piece: this thing that you're talking about really has to be designed towards tourists, not towards locals, because locals are already paying in their property taxes. The last one, the fourth one: and if in some magical future there is ever a statewide sales tax, this thing you're talking about has to go away. So I ingested this with folks I work with, people I talk with, and started bringing this around to other people across the state. And we developed a proposal of sorts, but I don't want to dive too much into the proposal as the thing in and of itself. The question in and of itself is what unified people. This big question: how do we address the property tax impacts of tourism? And at last call, there were nearly 30 people on a phone call from across the state, all unified around trying to figure this out. And we were actually able to get the State Chamber of Commerce to include questions about our proposal in a statewide poll. And it polled at 70%. 70% yes, would you be okay with charging tourists for some of their services as a way to lower your property taxes? What do you know? People were good with that. Well, we brought this to the state, and at that point realized it wasn't going to go any further, not right now. And the best strategic thing to do was to work in the interim with some of our wonderful legislators to make this move forward, and that's exactly what we're going to do. But I wanted to let you know about this because this is something I hear about, and we in the County Commission hear about all the time. Property taxes are too high, you got to do something. So I wanted to let you know this was happening. But it's also a segue into the next piece of what I'm going to talk about, because tourism, I believe, is the sibling to in-migration, to people moving here, not just choosing to come here for a few days, 6.5 days, but choosing to move here. And when thinking about people coming to move here, and we know these in-migration rates are sky high, and everybody has felt it in terms of the housing market and everything else, and again, this is a good thing. It's worth asking, why are people coming? And I'm going to go way out on a limb and say they're coming to live here for the same reasons that they're coming to visit. This is a really wonderful place. It has this amazing identity, an identity built on things like food and drink and arts, and I guess I gotta just say it, it's coffee, pastry, beer, and spirits and music, but okay. And all that a stone's throw away from amazing outdoor recreation, and built on this really kind, forgiving, relaxed, generally happy culture. That's, I think, why people are moving here. So when thinking about in-migration, I feel like we're facing some puzzles. And what I want to do today is not give you answers to those puzzles, but just encourage you all, us all, to wrestle with these things. Because I feel like we're going to get to the answers through publicly wrestling with them and through privately wrestling with them. So I'm fortunate enough not just to be a county commissioner, but to be on the board of MEP. And as a county commissioner, we are partners in the dispersal of Big Sky Trust Fund grants. These are grants businesses get for starting jobs. So once a month or so, Nicole brings these young CEOs and founders, and we get to chat with them. And at the point they get to us, it's just a rubber stamp. They're getting the grant. Thanks. 1 minute. I can't barely say hello in 10 minutes. We ask them, why Missoula? You could be anywhere. Why Missoula? And they always say the same thing. They refer back to that culture I just mentioned. In fact, one person, one CEO, said, being in Missoula confers upon us a hiring advantage. It's this place. So when thinking about in-migration, we at the county and I know at the city have chosen to be expansive rather than exclusive. Those are Bryce Ward's words. Our expansiveness is demonstrated in things like the Build Grant and the Y and our reforming of our zoning code. We are doing everything we can to make way for more housing. But the question here I want us to wrestle with is that if people are coming for that specific culture I was describing, and that specific culture in and of itself does not generate much money. The money comes from those other businesses I was mentioning. How do we navigate this? How do we make space for a culture that doesn't make money as a lure to the stuff that does bring in money? How do we expand without damaging the integrity of our identity? In short, how do we save our skin without selling our soul? So what I would love y'all to do, there's the red card, right, is wrestle with this publicly, privately, and let's all keep talking about it. This is, I believe, one of our big challenges in navigating change, and I'm super proud to be part of it all. Thank you.
Thank you. When I first moved to Missoula so many years ago, my friends would come visit, and they're like, you live in Missouri-Zula, this is dumb. And then they came to visit again, like recently, and their thoughts were, why don't I live here? It's like, because I do. It's my town. Go away. Anyway, thank you very much. All right, our final panelist is Mayor Jordan Hess. He moved to Missoula in 2005 to attend the University of Montana, where he studied geography with an emphasis in community and environmental planning and cartography and GIS. His most recent work for more than 8 years was as the Director of Transportation for the University of Montana, where he led UM to be the first college campus in the nation to operate modem fast-charging battery electric buses. And during his services on the City Council, Mayor Hess has several leadership roles, including Chair of the Public Works Committee, Chair of the Transportation Policy Coordinating Committee, Chair of the Land Use and Planning Committee, and Vice President of the Council. Bit of an overachiever, aren't you? Mayor Hess believes the most critical issues facing Missoula and many other cities across Montana: housing, the climate crisis, tax reform, equity, and people in crisis. So please welcome Mayor Hess.
Thanks, Jill. And I've had a cookie and a cup of coffee, so I'm fortified and I can get 11 minutes worth of remarks in 10 minutes, I think. I want to thank the City Club for sponsoring this event and these forums, and I want to thank you all for having me here today. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that this is my first time on this stage, which was occupied for the last 17 years by our friend and colleague and my mentor, John Engen. And over the last year, or over the last 7 months since I've been in this role, I want to thank the community for the support and the grace that they've shown me. And I want to thank our city staff for working tirelessly to deliver services in a way that is predictable and stable to the benefit of our community. It has been a smooth transition in a challenging time, and I want to thank you all for that. We're living in a challenging time, broadly speaking. We are emerging from the COVID-19 pandemic that fundamentally altered our lives and our social support system. We're living through a climate crisis where safe, decent, affordable homes are increasingly out of reach for people in our community, but also for people around the West and throughout the country. And we're living through a climate crisis. We're in the throes of that climate crisis, and we see more wildfire smoke. We see less predictable winter storms. We see our children with climate anxiety. And we are also living with a legislature that is hell-bent on making it difficult for local government to accomplish the things that local government needs to do, save the couple of legislators that I see in the room who are not doing that. But, and we've got people in crisis, again, throughout the country, throughout the West, throughout Missoula. People experiencing mental health crises, people experiencing addiction crises, people that are unable to have their basic immediate needs met. So that's the operating environment that we're in. And that is the challenge that those are the challenges that we need to deal with at all levels of government. But in challenges, we grow. And in challenges, as Missoulians, we come together. And as Missoulians, when we have a challenge in front of us, we plant a flag and we determine what kind of community we want to be, and we work hard to be that community. We come together, we lift each other up, and we work together to solve problems. And so, in spite of the fact that we're living in a challenging world right now, I am fundamentally optimistic about the city of Missoula and about our work as partners. I am fundamentally optimistic that we will meet these challenges with decisive action and that we will be better for it. I've said this over and over again, and some people, I think, are probably getting tired of me saying it, but I believe that local government can be a transformative force for good in the lives of the residents we serve. I believe that local government can help us solve problems, can help us become the community we want to be, and can frankly solve problems that other levels of government are not solving. So that's one of the reasons for that at the City of Missoula is that we routinely, as the city, adopt plans and policies that set a strategic direction. Again, we plant a flag and then we get to work on achieving our goals. Our latest strategic plans has guiding principles that include trust, opportunity, inclusion, environment, housing, and economy. Again, important issues that we can make headway on at the local level. I can't go into all of these in the interest of time, but I will talk briefly about housing and climate. On the housing front, the city is working on code reform, which doesn't sound very sexy, but it is probably the most impactful thing that we can do to improve the livability of our community and the affordability of housing for the next generation. Our land use code right now is a little bit like the junk drawer in your garage. It is full of tools that are rusty and dull and disheveled and out of order, and you might find what you're looking for if you rummage around in there. There's a good chance it'll take you a long time. You might get cut. You might need a tetanus shot. But what you need is likely in that junk drawer. What we are doing through our code reform process is organizing those tools and building the toolbox that we need to build housing for our community's future. And so we are taking a look from soup to nuts at our land use development process, and we are working to reform that process and to reform that code so that we can build housing that Missoulians can afford for future generations. It's not sacrificing quality. It is not every house, every place, every time. It is maintaining our standards of quality and making sure that our regulations match the needs in our community. We are also, and that process is fundamentally about creating opportunity within our community, and it's about building resilience for our future. On the note of resilience, the city is also working on climate action and building a resilient community in the face of climate change. We have, my first action as mayor, one of my very first actions was to go to the city council and request that they adopt a climate change policy, which we call our climate change lens. This climate lens will help us evaluate every city decision through the lens of the climate impacts of that decision. Local government for decades has been very good at looking at the financial implications of decision making, but we haven't been very, and that's extremely important, and we will continue to do that, but we haven't been very good at looking at the social, at the climate, the environmental impacts of our decisions. So through this climate lens, the city of Missoula will start evaluating municipal decisions to their, from the standpoint of their impact on our climate, and thereby their impact on our future generations. It's important work, and it's just getting off the ground, but we'll see that developed and released throughout this year. I want to zoom in a little bit and talk about the strategic plan, not from the high level, but from the standpoint of a case study, kind of walking through our community. And we're going to start geographically. We're going to stick it in the west side neighborhood and in the west end of town, and just go through a few examples, just to show what targeted investment and intentional programming can do within our community. So let's start at Lowell School, where the City Parks and Recreation Department has partnered up with Lowell School to provide after-school programming for 125 kids in the north side, west side neighborhood, and recreational, social, and educational opportunities for Lowell families and families throughout the neighborhood. Since the inception of this program, we have seen an increase in the test scores, in the reading test scores of students at Lowell School. Just next door, West Side Park has been permanently preserved through the application of federal land and water conservation funds. This is a partnership between the Missoula County Public Schools and the City of Missoula. And that park now will remain green space in perpetuity because of that partnership. We were able to leverage over $2 million in private and federal funds, with just over $250,000 in local funds in order to preserve and protect that park for future generations. Meanwhile, on Scott Street, we're about to break ground on 9 acres of housing that will be housing that Missoulians can afford. A number of those homes will be permanently affordable home ownership opportunities. This will be the largest home ownership project, the largest affordable home ownership project in the state of Montana history. Back to the west, the city was able to purchase the Bridge Apartments and prevent the eviction and displacement of over 20 low-income individuals with disabilities. We are supporting an application right now for federal low-income housing tax credits to renovate and preserve those homes into the future. Further down Broadway at the Sleepy Inn, we operated a city-owned non-congregate shelter during the COVID-19 pandemic. That shelter absolutely, without a doubt, saved lives during the pandemic. And now we have an opportunity to re-envision what that site is for the future. So we're deconstructing that motel right now, preventing the materials that were the building materials in that site from going to the landfill, and we have that listed for sale right now for development as or for redevelopment as housing. Over the course of that life of that project as a shelter, we received FEMA reimbursements for our expenses. So we saved lives, we made money, we're developing housing, and we're reinvesting the proceeds into our Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That is a huge win for our community. To the west of that, the county's temporary safe outdoor space opened in January. This site provides 40 safe, secure, tiny homes for individuals experiencing homelessness in our community. And that's been a huge success because nearly 50% of the residents of that temporary safe outdoor space have been able to find housing, stable, secure housing, as a result of the social services that were wrapped around them on that site. Just nearby to that, the new Community Navigation Center will open soon. And this center will provide access to services for people in crisis, whether that's assistance in navigating a Medicaid application or a housing application. Navigation centers are proven to get people off the streets and to get them on a pathway toward a safe, healthy home and toward stability. Just downstream from there, our wastewater treatment plant is about to flip the switch on the largest solar array, the largest non-export solar array in the state, thereby, again, reducing our environmental footprint. And nearby, the Mullen Area Build Grant was a $13 million federal grant that funded transportation infrastructure in the area between Reserve Street and the airport, enabling the development of several thousand homes. There are 3,000 homes in the pipeline already, and I'm out of time, so I will wrap really briefly by saying that these are just some of the city-sponsored activities that have been going on in the community throughout the last year, and just in one geographic area. And I chose to focus on that geographic area to really show the impact that we can have throughout the community. I said it at the beginning, and I'll reiterate it now. The world is a challenging place right now. But in Missoula, the strength of our community lies in the people. It lies in all of you. It lies in the collective commitment that we have made to one another as Missoulians. So let us do what we do best as Missoulians. Let's come together. Let's lift each other up. Let's become and be the best versions of ourselves. And let's grab a shovel and get to work together. Thank you all.
All right, so everyone's got a boatload of questions, right? No? All right, so this is the point where we take a quick break. This is table talk for those of you who have not been here before that don't understand how table talk works. Essentially, we'll take 10 minutes. You can introduce yourself at the table. I think everyone's got a full belly, so no one's going to bite. So make sure to introduce yourself and then discuss the topic that you want to present at your table. We will have 2 people walking around with mics. So find a designated question person at your table and make sure to raise your hand. When you do stand, please make sure not to have an elaborate statement and kind of get right to your question if you would. So we'll return in about 10 minutes and we'll start the show off. So thanks. Okay, so as I said at the beginning, we are committed to civil discourse. So we ask that you keep your questions respectful and you avoid making statements. We also ask that any members of the media please wait until the end to ask questions. I'm sure our panelists would love to hang out afterwards for at least an hour, maybe 2, and go through this stuff. So again, when asking your question, please stand up, introduce yourself, and avoid long drawn-out statements. We've got a lot of people, so we're going to try and get through as many questions as possible, and we're only down to 2 mics, so bear with us. So ask one question. Ready? All right, let's go. Actually, I'm going to hold off. Before you ask your question, I'm going to put the pressure on Jill to ask one question because she didn't show up with one.
Go figure. Okay. So a lot of subdivisions are going around, being built, being constructed, being designed, and a lot of complaints from people like me and people like who are like me, are concerned that maybe the density is too great. You know, we're the 4th largest state, so it seems terrible that you have these new subdivisions where houses are like so close together. It feels kind of like the opposite of what Missoula is supposed to be about. And I know we all need to have these housing, we need to have the opportunity, but even one that was put in my neighborhood, the houses are on top of each other. We were told it would be upper 200,000s, lower 300,000s by the time they were sold. I know these little townhouses are now going for over 400,000, so that wasn't true. And the density is just so great, it looks like nonsense. So are we like listening more to these developers to try to cram more in? Or can we maybe just stretch it out a little bit so there's more room for people to breathe?
I thought you'd give me a softball to start with, Jill. So it's a great question, and I think what I would say is that what we really need to do is develop a diversity of housing types. And the traditional small lot, or the traditional large lot suburban home, we just don't have the land area in the valley to develop in that pattern. So what we're trying to do through our code reform process is really look at thoughtfully developing a diversity of housing types so that it's not just one subdivision leapfrogging after another, but that there's thoughtful infill, that there's condos, that there's townhomes, that there's single-family homes, and that there's a thoughtful mix of it all. I think that one of the issues in our Western Fringe before our most recent planning effort has been this hard edge where you go from, maybe an apartment complex that's 4 stories or a condo complex that's 4 stories right next to a single family development. I think that there's a lot of opportunity through our code reform process to look at the buffers and the transitions and how do you move from one type to another. And I'll just point to the University District. Back before we had zoning, the university district developed in this really organic format, it's actually one of our most dense neighborhoods in the community. And you would never think that just walking through those tree-lined streets, that it was one of the most dense in the neighborhood. So I think there's a way that you can thoughtfully do a range of housing types, and that's what our goal is in the code reform effort.
Thanks, Jordan. A bunch of what I was going to say, Jordan said. So. That this is fundamentally a design question. So in our code reform, we did make space for ADUs in just about every area, and their design parameters, so that you don't get the feel that houses are on top of each other and that we've lost character. And then I also just want to say this one other thing. I'm going to quote the great patron sage of development, Paul Forsting. Paul's here. That everyone wants housing and no one wants it next to them.
Right.
And it's something we all just kind of have to swallow. So, and as Jordan pointed out, the large lot, single family homes are, it's not necessarily they're a thing of the past. That being the only option has to be a thing of the past. Thanks.
Do you have anything to add? No, got nothing? Okay. All right, is this on? Hello? Oh, yeah, let's get going with other. I just have a 3-story apartment building going up next to my house, so I'm grumpy. Full disclosure. Rah. Okay.
Hi, I'm Justina McDermott. I'm a recent graduate from last year, and I now work with WGM Group on water rights. And we weren't sure how to phrase this question, so I'll have to explain a little bit. But me and my peers had a hard time finding housing after graduation, even though we all found fairly great jobs with good pay. I found housing to be tough because I didn't qualify for low-income housing, but I'm not quite making enough money where I can comfortably afford a 1-bedroom apartment or have a few roommates, which everyone, has to have housemates eventually, but it's not ideal. So I guess the question is, with these housing plans coming up for Missoula, how are we accommodating people like myself, or I guess like new into the workforce, middle-class, younger folks, if that makes sense?
It's a great question, and it's a huge need in our community. We have a lot of opportunities for federal funding through low-income housing tax credits and other sources that really focus on below 60% of area median income, or in some cases below 80%, depending on the program. We also find that above median income, and maybe above 140% of area median income, someone can afford to buy a home with no assistance. So there's this donut hole between, this missing middle really, between 80% and 140% of area median income. And it's young professionals, it's nurses, it's firefighters, it's teachers, it's service workers, it's a wide range of people in our community that are priced out. So a lot of what we're doing is focusing on building supply, and going back to Jill's question about the density, one of the ways to do that is to reduce the land cost, and you can do that by putting more units on the same amount of land. And so townhomes and condos are a great opportunity. Those are things that we can encourage that will provide more affordable ownership opportunities. We're also working on this, I mentioned it in my remarks, but we're working on this community land trust development on the north side off Scott Street, and that's a format where you can buy the home and you have a long-term lease on the land, and it's income qualified. So the home is subsidized essentially through the city's contribution of the land, and that's something that we need to do more of. I think that it's a problem, again, nationwide, that this missing middle, there's people who can afford to buy a home and people who can afford to buy a large home, and the upper end of the income spectrum isn't struggling as much, and the lower end has some existing programs, so it's building out those programs. And I'd say I'd just acknowledge it as a concern, and it's something that we're working on through the code reform process. We're also working on, there's a new state statute that allows us to use tax increment financing for workforce housing, which includes this range, and so that's something that we're exploring as well.
I don't have too much to add other than to say the issue that you're facing, you described really well. And it's the same issue every community in the country that is a high amenity place. Every place that lots of people want to live they're all facing this very same issue. And we do need to put our focus, and are putting our focus, I would say, on the 200% of AMI and down. That's where we need to put our efforts. And At the county, we've chosen to lower the cost of housing by helping with infrastructure, doing this at the build area and then coming up at the Y. Hopefully that will bring some costs down. But we've also created a housing innovation fund and a workforce housing program that are in process right now, not done, but in process, all geared specifically at the group that you're talking about. Thanks for bringing it up.
And I'll add just one piece on this. And, we talked about the investments and infrastructure we're making at the university. Indirectly, it helps address this, right? Our housing, on-campus housing at the university, I think you could argue we probably didn't invest enough in that over the past 30 years. Our newest dorm was built in 1991, Panzer. The combined age or average age of Craig, Elrod, and Dunaway is, I think, 86 years. And so when I first got here, I joked with our team. I said, when I move students in every year, and I said, it's okay when the parent moving the student in says, hey, this dorm hasn't changed since I was here. But when the grandparent says that, you realize you have to make some changes. So we restructured our debt. We redid Panzer. Those of you who are walking by, you'll see that Knowles is offline right now. So Knowles is going to come back as a really cool kind of mid-century modern exterior, brand new interior, like great dorm to live in. We're going to have to remove Craig, Elrod, and Dunaway. That's eventually once we get a new dorm built. But we're playing catch up. I mean, to be honest, when UM had 15,000 students, UM did not have enough on-campus housing for those students. We didn't feel it as much because the market could absorb those students. But one of the reasons we're working to build good, high-quality housing on campus is so our freshmen and more of our sophomores want to be on campus. And we're looking to refurbish our apartments down on the south side of campus and try to increase the density there. So that's, but we got that started in kind of 2019. We've got a number of years to go, but that will help alleviate getting more of the students into good, high-quality on-campus housing, freeing up some of that space for others.
Next question.
Hi there, Travis. Ooh, I know I'm loud, but this is making me even louder. Travis Mateer, 23-year Missoula resident. The question for our table. For those who support encouraging expansion or claim it's inevitable, how do you propose addressing gaps in our criminal justice system to ensure public safety?
It's a good question. The city and county have a joint jail diversion master plan, and we have been working on implementing that over the last few years. Our new municipal court judges have some innovative programs that they're doing that are along those lines. So they have a program called Shelter Court, and that is a Zoom-based connection or a virtual connection to individuals at the Pavarello Center, and it's a virtual court appearance. It's specifically designed to help individuals clear up outstanding warrants or more minor issues that they can clear up without a punitive approach. And they're working on, similarly, a traffic court that would provide opportunities to get suspended licenses reinstated. Oftentimes, a license is suspended for something like failure to appear, and then it's really difficult to appear the next time when you don't have a license, or it's really difficult to go to work. So it penalizes someone, and that might have all started from someone not having car insurance. So it's really a punitive approach to poverty, and it's something that needs to change nationally, and I think there's some good effort being made locally on that. I also think that another aspect of this is really being thoughtful about our first responder response. And so we have a fantastic police and fire department. We have really thoughtful leadership in those departments. And one of the things that we did last year was start this mobile support team, which is a crisis intervention approach, and it's embedded in our fire department. It is a van with a social worker and a medical professional, and they show up and they deal with lower acuity calls. When someone is maybe having a mental health crisis and doesn't need law enforcement intervention. So what that does is it frees up our law enforcement to do things that truly are law enforcement and safety related issues. And so that's been a really positive development and something that we hope to continue to expand.
Thanks. Thanks for the question, Travis. And, the county's partner is a partner in the mobile support team, and as Jordan said, this is an intervention that reduces the pressure on law enforcement. A similar thing that we are engaged in, hopefully will be online by late fall or early winter, is a crisis receiving center. This would be a place where a person who is in mental health crisis or under the influence of something, and we don't know which one it is, can go for up to 24 hours and get their needs met, and then when they emerge from the state that they're in, have a proper evaluation. This is another tool that would reduce pressure on law enforcement, jail, and the emergency room, and we're following a pattern that's been well used and evaluated in terms of data and evidence in much more populated places. But these are the kinds of problems we're dealing with here right now. So mobile support team, crisis receiving are two things that jump to mind. Other things that jump to mind are the good work of some of our justice court judges. And in the county, I think we have 11 different elected officials, so now I'm going to talk about two others and give them credit. I'm not taking credit for this. But at justice court, we now have a road court. This is a court specifically for folks who have dealt with multiple DUIs. And the emphasis here is not just punitive, but rehabilitative, to get someone in a position where they're never going to do this again. And it's shown great success. Or Alex Beal, that first one was Judge Holloway. Alex Beal has got a domestic violence court. So addressing this horrible problem in a way that isn't just punitive, but it's also making sure that the person who's engaging in this activity isn't doing it again. These are two what I feel like are big leaps forward that help take the pressure off law enforcement.
Hello, Jacinda Morjo, Bitterroot Salish citizen and communications manager at United Way. So in light of the legislature's actions, how is UM, the county, and the city going to uphold equity and inclusion?
You know, I think I'd go back to the point I made, and we, every time we as a leadership team are thinking about at the university, you know, whether it's setting our priorities, identifying projects, I bring us back to those two words, inclusive prosperity. You know, Jordan mentioned our late and great friend, John Engen. John and I have talked about that term a lot. You know, look, I think we could go item by item, but our goal at the university is to, again, think about how do we make our university and this community as welcoming and an inclusive place as we possibly can. It doesn't mean that we don't have hard discussions. It doesn't mean that we don't challenge each other, but we do so in a respectful, informed way. You know, I think we could talk for quite a while about the efforts. I mentioned Grizzly Promise, that program. Some of the programs we've put in place to, you know, Director of Inclusive Excellence on our campus over the past couple of years. And the support systems in place, like I said, I mentioned our Native American student enrollment growth. That's not by accident. That's a focused, intentional effort. So, you know, I think what we're focused on is what we can control. What can we control on our campus? How do we, again, provide support for students from all backgrounds and walks of life? And how do we set in place policies and the resources to foster an inclusive campus? And that's what we're focused on.
Thanks. So at the county, we are very aware that these JEDI issues are something we need to focus on both internally, because we're an organization with a little more than 1,000 employees, and externally, in that really the mission of our organization is to deliver services to the residents of Missoula County. How do we make sure that those are delivered equitably, and how do we make sure our organization is run equitably as well? So to that end, we did hire a person, and then we are also engaged right now with the city in the creation of a JEDI advisory board that will function between the city and the county, And their job will be to bring policy recommendations to us so we move forward on these issues. And I have to say, I'm really excited about it, and this is stepping into the unknown and a little bit into the uncomfortable. I know we're going to stumble and get words wrong and do things wrong and then have to step back and do it right again. But I'm super proud we're attempting. We're so overdue for this. You know, the greater we have lived in one sort of way for a few hundred years. We're just beginning to try and alter that, and it's going to be a bumpy ride, and we are beginning. I'll leave it at that.
It's a great question, and I think the first thing we need to call out is that the legislature is doing some shameful things around civil liberties and around things in our community that are completely unacceptable. And so I guess what I would do is I would say that as your mayor, to our trans youth, for instance, you are valued, I see you, I support you, and our community will envelop you with love and support and the resources that you need to thrive in our community. Unequivocally, full stop, we will do those things. We will be a supportive community when our state isn't, and I commit to that. How we do that, the work on the ground through the Jedi Advisory Board, through our Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion resolution, through our work to implement that. There's nuts and bolts, and we need to, the first thing we need to do is make sure that inside our house that things are going well in the city. We need to look at hiring, we need to look at internal policies, and we're doing that. I think a lot of what the legislature is doing is really externally focused and is really, frankly, in my opinion, through a lens of hate. And so in response to that, what I would stand up and say is that hate is not the path that we take in Missoula, Montana, and it's not the path I will take.
Hi everyone, Carissa from Homeward. And at our table, even though we know you only had 10 minutes, we struggled to see a common thread between the three presentations. And we've heard some of it in your responses, but we're curious if you could speak a little to the changes that you each discussed and how you're working together to move forward with that change.
I'll start and then pass it down. One thing that we do is we do a regular leadership luncheon that include the three of us. Council President Jones is in that. We have leadership from Missoula County Public Schools that joins that. I think communicating and collaborating is something that we do quite well. Seth has said several times in the past that the best way to build a good city is to build a strong to build a university and wait 100 years. So we'll take some credit for some things that just the presence of a university has likely caused. But I think that being intentional, communicating, collaborating is the first step. I think the best thing the city can do is support things that allow the university to thrive, support housing policy that allows students to be able to afford to live here and faculty and staff to be able to afford to live here. And so a lot of what we do is adjacent. It's not necessarily directly connected, but it's related. And I think our ongoing communication is robust, and it's the best way to make sure that we're all singing from the same sheet of music.
Thanks. So one of the great things that came out of the pandemic was those MAC calls. I can't remember what the MAC stands for, Missoula area. I can't remember. It was all of us. And folks from the school districts and nonprofit leaders meeting once a week to talk about that ongoing, challenging, really rough situation. But that gave birth to much more wide open channels of communication that are regularly accessed. That's not how it was before. I feel like right now, these three institutions, not just the individuals, are really comfortable interacting with each other, informally as well as formally, and that's all to our benefit. So, Chris, when you said a tie, one of the things that jumped to mind from my mind was a study that I bumped into from Headwaters Economics probably 15 years ago. They were looking at cities and counties in the West that grew and were going to grow. All of them that were growing had a small set of common attributes. One of them, they had a major liberal arts university. They had a thriving business culture with an active, vibrant downtown. They had an airport and they had easy access to beautiful public land. If you had all those things, you were going to grow. That was 15 years ago. Lo and behold, it all came true. We are linked in that. We are all features of this place that other people want to move to and be part of. I know I'm kind of hearkening back to what I said, but these are part of the components that make this place the object of national demand. And therein lies the key to the solution. We have to work together as well.
Yeah, and I would just say, it's funny Josh mentioned it, because you don't even think to call it out because it's so natural. It's almost like two hands together, and it's so interwoven. We just think that way. In fact, we have 5 institutional priorities at the University of Montana, and one of them is partner with place. And so that means that our job, in part, is to make sure that this university, the University of Montana, is better because of the community in which we are so blessed to be located, but also that this city is a better place for the University of Montana. It turns out that Arthur Avenue is a permeable boundary, east-west. So we have to work really well together. That hasn't always been the case, I'm told. I think that you see that partnership. You see it when Jordan and Josh are talking about housing. Of course, it's going through my mind. Part of the reason we're renewing our dorms and thinking about our apartments is because we realize there's a housing crunch, right? The question about crime, I didn't jump in, but we often think downstream about crime. I'm also working upstream thinking about crime. Part of the impetus for launching Accelerate Montana, which is a different way of approaching education and saying, you know what? We can't just as a flagship university think about that traditional learner, right? We have to think about people and their learning and retraining and reskilling needs at all ages and stages of their careers. Even if it's not for credit. Those 1,200 people I talked about that went through Accelerate Montana over the last year, none of those show up in our enrollment numbers. I don't get funded for that by the legislature. But I know if we don't do that, where does somebody who's been laid off or needs to shift careers when they're 50 and have 2 kids at home and can't come back for a 2-year or 4-year degree, where do they go, right? We can't talk about inclusive prosperity if we don't think about serving every member of our community regardless of where they are in their careers. So it's, and some of the most inspirational stuff we've done has been working with our city and local leadership thinking, all right, how do we meet those workforce challenges? And our team from Accelerate Montana put together a great marketing video to kind of share what they're doing. And one particular gentleman stuck out for me in my mind. I'll never forget how he phrased it. He said, I'm 47 years old. I thought, when I lost this job, I thought I was done. I didn't think I had a chance again. And Accelerate Montana gave me a renewed lease on life. And we think about that being a key part of our community. We think about that being something we work on together. It absolutely is. And so I feel really grateful. Maybe we need to figure out how we better articulate that, because it's maybe become a little too natural and it's accepted for us. But good question.
Amanda Miller, a lifetime Missoula resident, sitting at a table full of people with a lot of gravitas.
Clearly you don't know us. Or have worked with us.
So we all kind of keyed into Josh's comment saying that how do we save our soul without selling our skin? And we all believed at this table that our soul... Oh, there you go. Save our skin, exactly, without selling our soul. And to us, the soul of Missoula is the culture that we have here, and we want to know from your perspective, how can we partner as residents and as leaders to make sure that we are not selling our soul to, yes, not selling our soul to save our skin. Thank you.
So there's sort of public things that we can be doing, like being involved in civic affairs. And there's also small private things that we can do. And I just heard about one the other day that really grabbed me. And I want to kind of let this person be anonymous too. But this is someone who owns commercial property. And in this large commercial property, they had multiple stalls, units. And they were raising rent on a big one that they knew they could get a more national tenant for, so that they could keep the rents low for the smaller ones that all occupy real places of love in our culture. And this person just made this decision on their own. They could have maximized their money in some other way, just an entirely private thing. In terms of a public thing, being involved in civic affairs, going to planning board meetings, weighing in on things like design, these are all really important. And having this type of conversation often with your friends and workmates and all of us. We can address this, but we need to be speaking about it out loud. Change is coming. It's coming really fast. And unless we intervene, unless we take some action, the change will happen to us. We can choose to be more the authors of our own destiny, but it means making some choices. And in these sorts of things that we're talking about, I feel like these are some hard choices because we may have to get involved literally in the market. Market intervention. How do we make sure a small store that is really beloved, that occupies a central place in our culture, gets to remain when really that space could be rented for something else? How do we make sure neighborhoods that are architecturally really beautiful and everyone loves them, but man, they could go away and be all three? How do we make sure those things remain in place? And it means we have to get involved in the market in the way that we haven't before, and that could be uncomfortable. But I think if we make this choice that the integrity of our identity is really important, that our culture is really important, we'll have to do these things.
Well, first of all, let's not sell our soul or skin or kidney or anything. But I agree wholeheartedly with what Josh had mentioned. And I think a great example of that is on housing. So we have the code reform effort that I mentioned, that is really the private side, the regulatory, how do we make it easier for people to build housing. We also have government participation in housing. So we have our Affordable Housing Trust Fund that is making targeted investments in housing that Missoulians can afford. And that is through a set of criteria. It is deliberate, it is objective in terms of how it is applied. And it has to be targeted because we can't afford, as government, we can't afford to intervene at the level that we truly need in order to solve our housing issue. We're not going to solve housing locally. We're not going to solve climate locally. What we can do is mitigate some of the external factors on housing. We can mitigate some of the external factors that are pushing, that are causing our community to change. We can't put up a gate and not let people in, but we can mitigate what happens when they do come in, and we can welcome them into a community that is very deliberately crafted and curated to be what we want it to be. So that's, I think, I met someone during the break who rents a couple of units, about 8 units, and deliberately and intentionally and voluntarily rents them below market rate. And that's the sort of thing that we can do as community members on the private side. It's as I said at the end of my remarks, though, it's going to take all hands on deck. We are going to have to continue to come together and push that rock uphill and be intentional about what we want our community to be.
Yeah, and I'd just add briefly, I mean, I think there's policy engagement. I'd just make 2 brief points, and one is, very direct. That is, the arts and culture, I think, is one of the key distinguishing aspects of our community. There's the soul is in the middle of the city's name. It's what defines us. That soul is fed through the university. Josh and I were talking on break, and I think we were talking when he went to the University of Montana. The percentage of a student's education that was state funded was double what it is today, and on an overall percentage. So our students are bearing significantly double the burden that they did a generation ago, and that's particularly difficult in the arts. And so, continue to come out and support the arts at the University of Montana. Come to our performances. They are terrific. Be a part of it. Be engaged. We have an amazing museum to house the treasures of the Montana Museum of Art and Culture that's coming up, going to be finished around homecoming. Come out, be a part of it. Believe it or not, we have to fund our arts programs in part on those revenues that we generate from the show. So come, be engaged, support our students. That's a very kind of tangible thing. The other piece of this is, and I'm literally preaching to the choir here, but continue to be engaged. Continue to be models for what an engaged populace look like. I think I didn't mention it here, but many of you might have heard that this past fall, I don't pay much attention to college rankings in general. They're kind of baloney. I could talk for 20 minutes about that. But one ranking that did pop onto my radar was by Washington Monthly that identified the University of Montana as the #1 university in the country for community and national service. And that's because of all of you, right? Our students are engaged. Some of you might know that we went through a rebranding process at the university and just to better articulate who we are. And one of the best quotes as we were talking to this communications firm about our wonderful community, one person in our little focus group, she said it so well. She said, Missoula is the place where apathy goes to die. And I tell you what, I see it as part of my job at the university to encourage our students to embrace that, to encourage our students to challenge the status quo, be a part of finding a better solution. Now, I say that knowing full well that to them, I absolutely represent the status quo. So that means my life is more difficult as the university president, but that's my job, right? And I guess my encouragement to all of you is continue to be that model for our young people, for my middle schoolers, for our high school students, of what it means to be an engaged citizen, to be somebody who cares about their neighbor, who doesn't buy in to the hateful, divisive rhetoric that's thrust upon us from outside this state, from outside of this community. Be those models. That's how we keep our soul. We live it.
Hi, I'm Frank Allen, and at my table are many inquisitive people with really good questions, and a number of them have been addressed already. What didn't get addressed yet, quickly, are how are Airbnbs taxed? Why adopt a high-density approach, and what about parking? But overall, I think at our table, we were also thinking long-term about the character of Missoula and how to protect it and not become like Jackson Hole or Tucson or other places that have just grown too much and too far.
Well, Frank, we solved parking this morning. So I'm happy to report that that's done. I'll start with Airbnbs. We have a regulation locally that regulates, it's a light touch regulation on short-term rentals, as we call them. And we are watching the legislature. The legislature has a couple of bills moving through that would restrict our ability to do any regulation at all on short-term rentals. One thing that we do is we pay for a monitoring service. So we monitor the number of short-term rentals and the prevalence of them throughout our community. We monitor how frequently they're rented. We monitor what types of units they are, whether it's a room in a house or a whole house, whether it is a permanent short-term rental or whether it's someone renting their whole house out for a Grizz game. There's a lot of nuance in how to approach regulating that, and what we have done over the past couple of years now is really engage in monitoring and engage in an effort to try to get registration and compliance with our regulation. What we find is that Bozeman and Whitefish have what I would call short-term rental problems. They have a high prevalence of short-term rentals, and it has a truly meaningful impact on our housing stock, or on their housing stock. Locally, we're not there, and I would possibly add a yet to the end of that. What we need to make sure is that we are thoughtful about how we do the regulation and that we don't get there. Frankly, right now, it's waiting to see what the legislature does. I have a strong sense that they will preempt our ability to have any regulation in this area, which would be a real detriment to local decision-making. And not just for us, but for the Bozemans and the Whitefishes that have far more exacerbated housing concerns than we have, and have, again, one less tool at the end of the day to deal with a problem. So it's an unsatisfying answer, and I think it probably will be an unsatisfying answer after the legislature, but that's kind of the state of the world. On parking, we just kicked off a year-long parking study through the Missoula Parking Commission to look at the future, particularly of downtown parking, but the boundaries, the jurisdictional boundaries of the Missoula Parking Commission, where their enforcement area is, looking at the University Residential Permit Program District as part of that, looking at modernizing our parking regulations. I spoke the other day with an in-home care worker who struggles to go downtown and park and for a short-term visit. So we'll look at things like, how do we handle loading zones? Are there short-term visits like that could qualify for a loading zone? Do we have loading zones in the morning and paid parking in the afternoon when the demand is higher? Do we need another parking garage? If so, where does it go? So that process just launched, and there's good information on our engagement website, which is engagemissoula.com, and great opportunities to get involved in that. But that parking planning process will help us define what we do with downtown parking in the next several years, and is really complementary to some of the other downtown transportation planning going on right now.
Thanks. I'm so glad parking's been fixed. That's I don't have too much to add to this. I do just want to say one small thing on Airbnbs, in that let's be careful about vilifying these things or saying short-term rentals are bad. For so many people, this is a way to make use of the one asset they have, and it allows them to stay here. So I hope the state creates some space where we can, and this is a city thing much more than a county thing, reasonably regulate these things and acknowledge that for a lot of people they are an essential part of a home economy and allow them to stay in their houses. So we need to be careful in navigating Airbnbs.
Good afternoon. I'm Melissa Matassa-Stone with WGM Group. We were talking a little bit about the legislature here. Curious what you see as both the biggest threat coming out of the session, but here's the catch, also the greatest opportunity for the university, county, and city. Thank you.
I think there are, that kind of cuts a lot of different ways. I think there's some good things coming out of the legislature. I am always worried about long-term funding for our university system. I mentioned we're blessed in Montana. We have 2 Research One universities in our state. As I mentioned, though, our tuition, our resident tuition, is over 25% lower than our peer averages, and our state support per student is also far lower than many of our peers. So we are in a low funding environment. I think I'm very grateful for the pay plan that gives a 4% raise on July 1st to state employees this year and next year. The challenge for us is only about half of our employees are state employees, and the state determines that they have about a 40% share. So the state will give us 40% of what we need to give that pay plan to half of our employees. So we've got to find then other ways to grow, and you see that through House Bill 2, and so the Office of the Commissioner of Higher Education and has been working with the legislature and to get some significant present law adjustments, but there's some one-time only things that we're going to have to address in the 25 session. So I'm worried about that. I think there are some exciting things. Many of you have seen the CLAP building on our campus. Currently that is it houses the #1 wildlife biology program in the country, and it's a building that absolutely needs addressed. So we have $37 million of House Bill 5 funding coming for the Clapp building, hopefully, if that clears. We also have in House Bill 10 some exciting funding for cybersecurity to address not just a real threat to launch programs, to training, but provides an opportunity for economic growth. The thing about cybersecurity jobs, you can do them anywhere. So a lot of the cybersecurity training that we've been doing as a university is in person, but it's also remote for people on tribal reservations, for example. And again, we're hopeful that one-time only funding gets through so we can really begin to address, again, not just a challenge, but an opportunity. So I think there's challenges, there's opportunities for sure.
Thanks. Geez, on the challenges, there's too many to just pick one. But I'm going to say two of them. One of them Jordan identified in his answer on the Jedi question. It does appear that our legislature is hell-bent on getting involved in the most intimate details of people's lives. And this, to the degree they're successful, will really mess people up in their ability to be happy. To step a little bit farther away from that, and that's so powerful emotionally, it's hard to step back. But to step back, at least to where Dave and Juan and I get to sit in terms of local government, the legislature is threatening to monkey with our tax system. And as I sped through in my 10 minutes of drivel there, not all tax reform is good reform. And the legislature, so it seems, appears to believe that locals are spending out of control. And they are attempting to curtail our ability to generate revenue as a way to do tax reform. And the consequences of this, if they're successful, will be felt by all of us in terms of things like roads and public safety and schools and everything that our public dollars pay for. Excuse me. On the positive side, we're not the only county. There are 56 counties, and the legislature really only has a few of them in their gun sights, yet we all play by the same rules. So it's a little bit difficult just to be massively punitive on one or two, though they are pretty creative. So those are my two threats on the personal and the larger political. On the opportunity side, there's been some good work lately, I should double check with Jonathan, around money for infrastructure. And it looks like there's a few potential bills out there that really could benefit us in terms of making money available for sewer, water, and roads, things that just have so many zeros behind them when you go to pay for them, that they can't be covered locally. We can barely cover the match requirements. So if some of those bills happen, I mean, that's really good. And I think even our legislature recognizes that when you have extra money, you invest it and invest it in something really solid and strong for the long term, like infrastructure.
Thanks. It's a great question. I think one of the best things that's come out of this is preparing for the future. So we have a coalition of mayors that has been meeting. There's a group of the big 7 mayors from the large 7 cities that has been getting together. The Montana League of Cities and Towns has a robust discussion on legislative issues. Our council president, Gwen Jones, is on their board of directors. We had a meeting of mayors from around the state in early March during the legislative transmittal break. And, you know, without fail, from around the state, big city, small city, Republican, Democrat, mayors are pretty uniformly irritated and disgusted with what's happening to local decision making. And I think that we have an opportunity between now and 2025 to really highlight the importance of local decision making and the really rich, strong tradition of local decision making in our state's history. It's something that we have had for decades, and it's suddenly under threat. There's 25 powers denied under 71111 MCA, which is local government powers denied. There's 25 of them. 13 of those came about in the last 10 years, and there will be many, many more of those by the end of this legislative session. So raising awareness about property tax, I think that's a good thing that's come out of this, even though the short-term impact is really negative. The most negative thing I think that is front of mind for me right now, because it has a hearing really soon, is there are a number of bills that really curtail or eliminate tax increment financing, which is our single greatest tool for investing in our community. We have utilized tax increment financing recently to invest in the Villaggio apartments on the north side. That's over 200 units of income qualified housing that would not have happened. 200 units for people making between 30 and 70% of area median income that would not have happened if this tool was taken away. It is our only tool to invest in workforce housing. It is our only tool to do so many things that are housing related, and that the legislature is poised to take a tool away. And so we really need people from the business community, from around the state, to reach out and to sound the alarm bells about how disastrous this would be for housing locally. I want to end on a good note, and that is that there's been some really good work on land use reform. So Senate Bill 382 is a bill that the city has supported that would modernize the way that we do land use development. It would really improve the timing of our public processes. It would improve the development process and result in better outcomes for land use development throughout our community. It's something that a variety of partners around the state have been working on for, in some cases, up to 6 or 7 years, and it is coming together and hopefully coming to fruition this session. But again, I just want to emphasize that I've met with a libertarian from Kalispell in local government, a Republican from Roundup, a wide range of politics and different types of communities, east, west, mountains, plains, big, small, conservative, liberal, and there is uniform disgust with what's happening to local government. And I think we just have to talk about that a lot between now and 2025.
So to add to that, at the last MACO conference, in interacting with county commissioners from all over the state, places that bear no resemblance to us, I heard exactly the same thing. Whether you're a county commissioner in Treasure County or the mayor of, pick a small town, mayor of Rapelje, you don't want to have your hands tied and be able to look your constituents in the face, say, we don't have the money, we can't help you, we can't fix that. It does seem like this crazy bit of hypocrisy that our state legislature shakes its fist at Washington, D.C. and says, local control, a solution for Massachusetts doesn't work here. We need to design our own solutions, fully aware of our own situation, and yet it seems that local control stops in Helena. And Jordan is right. We all need to be pushing on this, and thankfully, since I said all these counties and cities play by the same rules, there is a bit of pushback, but I get the sense the legislature is kind of giddy right now on their own sense of possibility. But I see a window of hope there too.
Perfect. Thank you. So thank you, Commissioner Slotnick, President Bodnar, Mayor Hess, and the infamous Jill Valley, for all your participation in the panel. Did you all learn a lot? I know I did. I mean, I came in with a full head of hair. Now I'm so much smarter.
How do you think I feel?
I know. Again, I want to thank our sponsors, especially First Security Bank and Blackfoot Communications, and of course, thank all of you for attending. Join us for our May 8th forum. That will be, we haven't got a catchy title yet, but we're working on it. So, the news media landscape in Montana, something like that. What? Or May 15th? Okay. Check our website. It's on there. So thank you all. Have a wonderful day.